Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I thank you for joining us today. We have an interesting story to talk about. Let's talk about reopening New York, reopening the states, reopening the nation, even though there is the COVID pandemic ongoing. There is science, and we want to look at that science. Now, let me start off with a very important thing. We know that science is eternally changing. There are no solid set facts of science. Science is always evolving and always changing. And even with global climate and global warming, the science is not fixed. It is never settled. That's why we get new developments and new information. With that said, we're going to look at the history of COVID and where we are right now in reopening. So I hope you will enjoy this. By the way, if this is the first time that you are joining us, we do long-form political commentary on this channel. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all other social media outlets that we can, that the internet overlords allow, to speak with you directly about the issues that matter, to see your comments, your statements, and to take your calls on all the issues that are affecting everyone in the world. We hope to see you on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's get into this. COVID, oh my God, it's been quite the roller coaster since February of 2020. We've been all over the place with this, and we're constantly told a few things, but let's go back a few days. Let's go back to almost a year ago in February of March 2nd of 2020, when the U.S. Surgeon General once warned against wearing face masks for the coronavirus, but the CDC now recommends it. Mind you, this title has been completely changed. This has been reworked based on the new news. And you can see on April 13th that the story and the title have been changed because the CDC changed their position. But it was back in March of 2020 that we saw that the U.S. Surgeon General said, was concerned that people might increase your risk of getting COVID-19 by wearing a mask if you're not a healthcare provider. Folks who don't know how to wear them properly tend to touch their faces a lot and actually can increase the spread of the virus. Which is interesting to say because most people have not become medical professionals since 2020. And most people do still touch their face, touch their head and their hands on a regular basis. How much that may be contributing to COVID, no one knows. But Eric Toner, a scientist at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, on March 2nd was quoted as saying, quote, "There is little harm in wearing masks, but it's not likely to be very effective in preventing getting COVID-19. That was the message on March 2nd. Now, by April 13th, well into the lockdown of the United States, things didn't change. Americans did not become professionals at wearing masks. Masks were used that were not N95s and therefore allowed the coronavirus to be transmitted, though at a slower rate, and people still got COVID-19. Then in May 5th, we heard Governor Andrew Cuomo, Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, stated, "Look at the data, follow the science, listen to the experts, be smart." That was his statement. And we did all this, and some people responded on May 5th of 2020 saying, we did all this social distancing and there wasn't a flood of cases, which means that's working. It's working. That's why no one's been flooded. That's why the hospitals were never overrun. Why we didn't use the USS Comfort when it was in New York Harbor. Okay. So what else did the science? So let's go back to the science. Remember, science said that we should be wearing masks now. Dr. Fauci comes out on, and this is in October 23rd of 2020, and says it might be time to mandate masks, something he had been against previously. And in that, he had said, and did I mark it? No, I did not. He says, I don't like to be an authoritarian from the general federal government, but at the local level, if governors and others essentially mandate the use of masks when you have an outbreak, I think it would be very important. He then goes on later to say, well, if people are not wearing masks, then maybe we should start mandating it. So even though he doesn't want to be authoritarian, he wants the government to now mandate masks as of October because, follow the science, he's changed his position. Okay. And what did we hear in October 15th, 2020, from the WHO, World Health Organization? They reported on October 15th, their European chief state that full-scale lockdowns should be the very, very last resort. In fact, Dr. Hans Kluge of the WHO's Regional Office for Europe says it is never too late to tighten measures, but of course, definitely, we are concerned. In general, this is a time to step up the restrictive measures, with lockdowns as a very, very last resort. We know much better than in March what can and needs to be done, because we need to eliminate COVID-19. And of course, wearing the mask, social distancing, this will remove COVID-19. Because we know better than in March, we know that we should be wearing masks instead of telling people not to wear masks, and we don't have to worry about people transmitting the COVID-19 virus to themselves because of messing with their faces and their masks. That's not a problem, and anyway, they're mandated by the government. Okay, so let's go to New York Times, December 29th, 2020. The first confirmed U.S. case of the more contagious British variant of COVID has been found in Colorado, and in particular, the variant was detected in a man in his 20s with no travel history. Wow, that's interesting. So between December and October, we saw that the coronavirus mutated in Europe. There is a stronger variant in Britain, which has traveled the world without a person having a traveling history to England, and they have it now. That's interesting. And they go on to say in that same article, there is a lot we don't know about this new COVID-19 variant. But the scientists in the United Kingdom are warning the world that it's a significantly more contagious virus. So scientists know there's a new variant. You have to wear your mask. You have to lock down and social distance, and we're losing businesses, but that's okay because we're going to wear a mask and that will take care of it. And we have, of course, the vaccine. So that will take care of it. And that's when we hear in January 5th of 2021, United Kingdom Prime Minister imposes harsh lockdown as new COVID-19 variant spreads. Oh, well, that's different. Well, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson reimposed a lockdown in England, and he says, quote, "It is clear that we need to do more to bring this new variant under control. That means that the government is once again instructing you to stay home." Okay, so we followed the science. We wore masks, we socially distanced, we have locked down businesses and had intermittent lockdowns, not only in Britain, but in the United States and in various states like New York State. We disallowed people from going out after certain times. We stopped people from going to small businesses, and there's a new variant. It's mutated, like most viruses do. Okay, well, let's keep going. What's the science? There's got to be something with the science, because remember, Cuomo said, follow the science. And we're following the science, and there is a new variant. So what does that mean? We simply can't stay closed. Vaccinations, boosting the economy, top agenda. But we're following the science. And the science is saying that there's a new variant in Britain, which is more contagious. We're not doing lockdowns. So we're going to open up the economy, according to Governor Cuomo. And in fact, Cuomo was saying New York has just used half of its roughly 1 million vaccine doses so far. And Cuomo said that New York won't have enough doses for roughly 4 million eligible New Yorkers until mid-April, based on the state's federal allotment of 300,000 vaccines per week, even though half of them aren't being used. So we're getting 300,000 doses, but half of them aren't going anywhere. Okay. And we simply cannot stay closed until the vaccine hits critical mass. But wait a minute. We were told that we had to lock down. We had to lock down everything to flatten the curve, that we had to stay locked down until we beat this virus because it's so deadly, because every life matters. We can't just return back to normal. That's why we're wearing masks and we have to social distance, and we can't go out after 10 o'clock at night. So obviously we can't reopen, right? But Governor Cuomo said we have to reopen. And he said that on January 11th, which is interesting because it was December 29th that we found out about the British variant. And it was on January 5th that Britain went back into a lockdown. So 6 days later, we saw that we have to reopen New York. Right after we saw that Joe Biden was confirmed as the president of the United States. That's interesting. And then we saw, of course, on January 14th, that Mayor Lightfoot of Chicago says that we have to reopen Chicago. I am very, very focused on getting our restaurants reopened. If we look at the various criteria that the state is set, we are meeting most, if not all of those, Lightfoot said. So this is a conversation that I will have with the governor, but I want to get our restaurants and our bars reopened as quickly as possible. So Mayor Lightfoot agrees with Governor Cuomo that we have to reopen our bars and businesses, but we have to wear masks and we have to social distance, and we can't be out after 10 p.m. And there's a new variant of the virus, and we have vaccines that are going unused en masse, like 50%. But we're following the science. We're following the science because we know that Joe Biden put out an executive order, day one, January 20th, that Americans will have to wear masks for 100 days. If you're on federal property, if you're a federal employee, you must wear a mask for 100 days. Absolutely. Because wearing a mask will be better. By the way, it doesn't matter that we said back in March of 2020, that it's not likely to be very effective in preventing COVID-19, and that there's no real harm in it, although it could cause more people to have COVID-19. But that doesn't matter because people are still wearing a non-surgical mask, which means COVID-19 still gets in and out. People are wearing scarves, they're wearing pieces of cloth, the things that they have around their house. So it's really not effective, but that's okay because we have to wear a mask, because wearing a mask will stop COVID-19, and with social distancing and closing down small businesses and keeping away from other people and having less than 10 people around you at any given time. Okay, so that makes sense. But that's only in New York, that's only in New York State, that's only in Chicago that they're looking to reopen, right? Because everywhere else in the nation, they know we have to follow the science. And then it's January 21st. And DC Mayor Browser confirms indoor bar and restaurant services to resume at 25% capacity starting on January 22nd. January 22nd. That's interesting. 2 days after Biden has taken over, 2 days after we have a mandate to wear masks for 100 days in the federal government and suggested for everyone in the nation.
Girls,
Whoops.
there's an elephant in our bathroom.
What? So that's interesting. So we have to go and reopen the businesses, and they're going to reallow businesses, bars, and restaurants to return to 25% capacity. At the same time that we know that 400,000 people have died because of COVID-19 in the United States, there is a new variant from Britain that is sweeping. It's jumped into the United States from unknown causes. And wearing a mask may or may not cause you to be more likely to get COVID. But that doesn't matter because we're following the science. And the science says that we have to nearly lock down the nation. And we have to social distance. And we have to have limits on how much businesses are open, but we're going to reopen all the businesses. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because, Governor Cuomo, January 23rd, tells us, trust science, get a vaccination. By the way, we did ask, please cite the source that shows that COVID being is hyperactive depending on the time of day. Like after 10 p.m., COVID is more active. It's more likely to get you. COVID is more likely to affect you if you've not eaten any food rather than if you do eat food. If you're standing in a restaurant, well, COVID is more likely to reach you than if you're sitting down. I assume that also means that COVID is more likely to affect people who are taller than people who are shorter because that's the same thing as sitting down versus standing up. So again, we're following all the science here. Wear a mask, even though it may not be effective because you don't actually have a surgical mask. Wear a mask, even though since people don't normally wear masks, you may cause yourself to get COVID because you're putting your hand on your face, like Joe Biden has done, as we've seen on TV. But don't worry, we need to social distance. We have to be around less than 10 people. We have to make sure we're wearing the mask, which is a mandate anyway, just like Dr. Fauci said he wanted after he said he didn't want that, because we're following the science, and that's why we're going to reopen the businesses. Because the deadliest disease that we've seen, it's a pandemic around the world, and therefore we need to open our businesses. Right. And then we come to what? January 25th, today, 5 days into the Biden administration. And we see that Joe Biden has set a target for 1.5 million COVID vaccinations, up from 1 million, this is fantastic. 1 million. Why would he do that? We're going to have more vaccinations. We're going to target 1.5 million. Why would we be doing that? Because we already met the 1 million per day target set by President Trump, reiterated by Joe Biden on January 20th. The target was to hit 1 million vaccinations per day. The Trump administration was well on pace to actually hit that goal. But since this is something that we saw that President Trump promised and delivered on, well, now Joe Biden has to make it 1.5 because, COVID plays politics. It understands politics completely. That's why we know that throughout the entire summer, as people protested for Antifa, that spread 0 cases of COVID. But when the bikers got together over at one of the biker rallies, that did cause COVID. And when people got together in Washington, D.C. before January 6th, well, that caused COVID to spread, not the Antifa rioting in Seattle, Portland, in Austin, Colorado, New York City, Rochester, at least 15 distant cities like Atlanta, throughout the entire nation. No, that spread no COVID whatsoever because COVID is political, as well as it can, not only can it tell your political preference, but it also only affects people who are standing and not sitting. So therefore, if you're taller, it affects you. And if you're shorter, it doesn't. If you've eaten food, you're resistant to COVID, as opposed to if you haven't eaten any food. And of course, if you go out after 10 o'clock at night, you're more likely to get COVID than if you did during the day. Meanwhile, you're going to wear a non-surgical mask, which may or may not cause you to get more COVID and may or may not be effective at all, because we're following the science and we're trusting the science, and we're trusting scientists like Governor Cuomo to tell us what to do, like Mayor Lightfoot to tell us what to do, like Governor Newsom to tell us what to do, because governors have degrees in science, right? They're doctors, right? Okay, wait a minute. Let's keep going. Because, wait a minute. LA County. We almost forgot. LA County. On January 25th, stated after Governor Gavin Newsom lifted the regional stay-at-home order in Los Angeles County. Because, well, we're doing well. COVID-19. We're reducing the cases. It's time to reopen. Even though, again, we know that there is a British variant. But wait a minute. There's more than a British variant, because on the same day, this is, again, January 25th, same day that we are going to have 1.5 million vaccinations a day, up from the 1 million because we're doing better than Trump did. No, on the same day, we know that LA is opening up. And we find out that the first case of a Brazilian variant of the COVID virus is in Minnesota. And we know that there is a South African variant of the COVID virus that hasn't reached the United States yet, but exists. So there's 3 mutations plus the main strain of COVID-19 that's running around the world. But you're going to wear a mask and you're going to be okay, as long as you're a shorter person or sitting down rather than standing up or being tall, and as long as you have food in your stomach and you're not out after 10 o'clock, you're okay. Even if you're wearing a non-surgical mask. Okay, maybe. And by the way, get a vaccine, because the vaccine will protect you against COVID-19. And we know this because, again, quoting New York Times, Moderna and Pfizer vaccines still protect from the variant circulating in South Africa, the companies have said, but they are slightly less effective. They are expected to perform similarly against the variant identified in Brazil, which means slightly less effective. And the variant identified in Britain is more transmissible, it's more contagious, but just as susceptible to the vaccines as the original form of the virus. So it's good. The vaccine is good against the British version and kind of against the South African and the South American versions, but not as good. Okay, even though it hasn't been tested and even though there are some side effects for a bunch of people, as we're learning. Okay, so that's good. So we know that's good. And we know that the British variant has already gone through 22 states in America. We don't know how it got here, but it's here. But don't worry, nothing to be concerned about, because the science is telling us that, let's go through it. If you're following the science and listening to the experts, you should wear a mask, even though it's not very effective, and you may give yourself COVID because you put your hand to your face. But you're going to wear a mask that's not qualified at stopping viruses from getting in because you don't have an N95. You're wearing a piece of cloth. That doesn't matter, though, because it's good to have one. And you're going to wear that. And if you're tall, you're going to be sitting down because shorter people are better. And you're going to eat food because if you eat food, you're more resistant than if you don't eat food. And you're not going to be out after 10 o'clock at night because it's more active after 10 o'clock at night. And you can't be around more than 10 people, but you can go to the Walmart or the local big ticket store which are open, because the mom and pop stores that would have less people in it, they're closed down. But you can go to the big stores where hundreds of thousands of people are going through every day, because that's not a hot spot, and that's okay. And remember, you're going to get a vaccine that may or may not have side effects that will protect you to some extent against all the different variations that keep mutating on this disease. And because of that, and even though we have higher numbers of cases, we do have lower numbers of deaths. but that means that we can open up every business in the nation, even though we're going to have a requirement for 100 days to wear a mask. And all of this is subject to change on any given day, at any given time, by any given elected official at any level of government in the United States and around the world. Because we're following the science. I hope that made that more clear for you. Thank you.